2 years have passed, and Peter Parker finds himself constantly torn between his ordinary life and his duties as Spider-Man. Trying to keep both worlds afloat proves nearly impossible. He's fired from his pizza delivery job after too many late arrivals, and the small amount of money he earns selling Spider-Man photos barely helps. J. Jonah Jameson eagerly buys the pictures, only to twist them into harsh headlines for the Daily Bugle. At college, Dr. Connors reprimands Peter for skipping classes and watching his grades slip. He reminds him that his research paper on Dr. Otto Octavius's groundbreaking fusion experiment is long overdue. Peter can only nod, distracted and exhausted. Later that day, Peter walks into what turns out to be a surprise birthday party organized by Aunt May, with Harry and MJ there to celebrate. It takes him a moment to realize it's even his birthday. His friends quickly notice how distant he's been lately, questioning his constant absences. The conversation turns to Otto Octavius, now backed by Oscorp. Harry proudly explains he's overseeing special projects and is personally funding Octavius's ambitious work. Seeing Peter's admiration, Harry offers to arrange a meeting. He also nudges him about MJ, hinting that she still has feelings for him. "She's waiting on you," he says. The mood shifts when Spider-Man comes up. Harry's bitterness surfaces. He asks Peter point-blank if he would reveal Spider-Man's identity if he knew it. Peter's silence is answer enough, and Harry walks off. That night, Peter notices a foreclosure notice beside Aunt May's bed while she sleeps. When she wakes, she insists on giving him $20 for his birthday. He refuses, but she presses it into his hand anyway, saying it's all she can offer. The gesture weighs heavily on him. Outside, Peter runs into MJ. She admits she was glad he came to the party and lingers, hoping he'll say something meaningful. He doesn't. She reveals she's seeing someone new, reading the jealousy in Peter's face. Trying to recover, he promises he'll attend her performance the following night. "Don't let me down," she says softly. He promises he won't. Back at his apartment, Mr. Ditkovich reminds him, loudly, about the overdue rent. Peter retreats into his small room, feeling the pressure closing in. The next day, Harry introduces Peter to Dr. Otto Octavius. Otto has heard glowing praise of Peter's intellect, alongside rumors of laziness. Otto eagerly describes his dream, a sustainable fusion reactor capable of providing clean, nearly limitless energy. Peter raises concerns about maintaining a stable reaction, but Otto assures him that every safeguard is in place. Impressed by Peter's insight, Otto warmly praises his brilliance. On the night of MJ's play, Peter dresses nicely and buys flowers, but crime doesn't wait. As Spider-Man, he's pulled away to save lives and stop criminals. By the time he reaches the theater, the show has already begun and he's denied entry. From a distance, he later sees MJ with the man she's dating. She glances around, almost hoping to see Peter, but misses him completely. Swinging through the city afterward, Peter suddenly finds his web shooters failing. He plummets from a building, crashing painfully to the ground. Shaken, he begins questioning everything. The next day, he leaves MJ an apologetic message, though it does little to mend her disappointment. He longs to tell her the truth, that he's Spider-Man, but knows that revealing it would only endanger her further. Soon after, Peter and Harry attend Otto's public fusion demonstration. To safely handle the volatile materials involved, Otto has designed 4 powerful mechanical arms, fused directly to his nervous system. An advanced inhibitor chip allows him to control them while suppressing their artificial intelligence. The experiment relies on tritium, a rare element with only a small global supply. As Otto activates the reactor, he marvels at the energy forming in his grasp, but the reaction quickly destabilizes, pulling in surrounding metal objects with magnetic force. Harry demands the shutdown, but Otto insists it will balance out. When debris threatens Harry's life, Spider-Man intervenes, saving him. Attempting to stop the reactor, Spider-Man clashes with Otto. Tragedy strikes when flying shards fatally wound Otto's wife. In the chaos, the inhibitor chip is destroyed, leaving Otto vulnerable to the influence of the arm's AI. At last, Spider-Man manages to halt the reaction. Later, surgeons attempt to remove the mechanical arms, but the devices activate violently, attacking everyone in the operating room. When Otto awakens, he sees the devastation left behind, his creation now controlling him rather than the other way around. Otto returns to the ruins of his laboratory, devastated but not defeated. Without the inhibitor chip to restrain them, the mechanical arms begin influencing his thoughts. The artificial intelligence whispers relentlessly, urging him to rebuild the reactor, no matter the cost. To do that, he'll need money. He storms into a nearby bank, tearing open the vault with terrifying ease. By coincidence, Peter and Aunt May are inside discussing a desperately needed loan. As chaos erupts, Peter slips away to change into Spider-Man. The The battle that follows is fierce. Spider-Man struggles again when his webs malfunction mid-fight, giving Otto the upper hand. In the chaos, Aunt May is seized and used as leverage. Despite the setback, Peter regains control of his webs, pursues Otto across the city skyline, and ultimately rescues his aunt from a deadly fall. Otto escapes with the stolen cash, disappearing into the city. That evening, Peter attends a Daily Bugle event as the paper's photographer. The occasion honors astronaut John Jameson, son of J. Jonah Jameson. Standing proudly beside John is Mary Jane Watson. Peter watches from a distance, his heart sinking. Later, he attempts once more to apologize to MJ for missing her performance. She stops him cold. She admits that holding on to hope about him is too painful. Before he can respond, a drunken Harry stumbles over, angrily accusing Peter of supporting Spider-Man, the man he blames for his father's death. As if the night couldn't get worse, John publicly announces his engagement to MJ. The applause echoes in Peter's ears. That same night, Peter's powers fail him yet again. He collapses in a dark alley. Even his eyesight blurs as he reads the latest headline accusing Spider-Man of aiding Dr. Octopus in the robbery. Meanwhile, Otto uses the stolen funds to reconstruct his lab, planning an even larger and more dangerous fusion attempt. Overwhelmed by doubt, Peter imagines Uncle Ben standing before him. The weight of guilt and exhaustion pushes him to a decision. He can't do this anymore. He leaves his suit behind in a trash bin and walks away from the life of Spider-Man. In the days that follow, Peter returns to being an ordinary young man. Without his powers, his life steadies. His grades improve. He attends MJ's performances. He tells her he's changed and can finally commit to her, but she gently shuts him down. She's engaged to John, and she intends to honor that promise. Later, Peter and Aunt May visit Uncle Ben's grave. May confesses that she's always blamed herself for suggesting Ben pick Peter up that night. Unable to bear it any longer, Peter admits the truth. He had the chance to stop the thief responsible but let him go out of selfishness. That same man killed Ben. Peter reaches for her hand, but she quietly withdraws and walks away, heartbroken. Dr. Octopus soon confronts Harry, demanding more tritium for a larger-scale experiment. When Harry hesitates, Otto threatens him. Harry reluctantly agrees, but only if Otto delivers Spider-Man alive. He reveals that Spider-Man can be found through Peter Parker, the photographer who always seems to know where he'll appear. Elsewhere, Peter encounters a burning building. Though he no longer wears the mask, he can't ignore the cries for help. He rushes inside and rescues a child. Later, he learns someone else was still trapped and didn't survive. The loss weighs heavily on him. Back at his apartment, Mr. Ditkovich's daughter shyly offers Peter a slice of chocolate cake, clearly smitten. For a brief moment, life feels simple. At Aunt May's house, Peter finds her packing to move into a smaller, more affordable place. He tries to apologize for hurting her with the truth, but she stops him. She tells him she's proud of his honesty. Then she reminds him that people need heroes, imperfect, struggling heroes. Sometimes, she says, heroes must sacrifice what they desire most, even their dreams. She hugs him and tells him she loves him. Inspired, Peter attempts to reclaim his powers, but when he jumps, he falls flat once more. Soon after, MJ asks Peter to meet her at a cafe. She admits she's been thinking about him and seems ready to reconsider. For a brief moment, hope returns, but Peter stops her. He tells her he was wrong before, he can't be what she needs. He doesn't explain why. Frustrated and confused, MJ demands to know if he loves her. He denies it. She doesn't believe him and challenges him to prove it with a kiss. As they lean in, Peter's spider sense suddenly flares back to life. A car crashes violently through the cafe window. Peter instinctively shields MJ, pulling her to safety. Moments later, Dr. Octopus emerges from the wreckage. He tells Peter to deliver a message to Spider-Man. Meet him at the West Side Tower at 3 o'clock, and this time, there will be no escape. Dr. Octopus seizes MJ as leverage and hurls Peter aside into the wreckage of the ruined cafe. Peter crashes through debris and into the street below. As he struggles to his feet, something shifts, his vision sharpens, his strength surges back, and clarity returns. His powers are restored. Across town at the Daily Bugle, J. Jonah Jameson has mounted Spider-Man's discarded suit on his office wall, having purchased it cheaply from someone who found it in the trash. Peter quietly retrieves the costume, leaving behind only a brief note. Spider-Man is back. He confronts Dr. Octopus at the West Side Tower. Their brutal fight spills from the skyscraper rooftop onto an elevated subway train roaring through the city. During the chaos, Otto discovers Spider-Man's greatest vulnerability: innocent people. He throws 2 passengers from the train, forcing Peter to rescue them. Realizing this weakness, Otto sabotages the controls, locks the throttle at maximum speed, destroys the brakes, and leaps away, leaving Spider-Man aboard a runaway train hurtling toward disaster. As sparks erupt from the shattered control panel, Peter's mask is torn away. With the train racing toward the end of the track, he leaps to the front, firing webs onto nearby buildings. Bracing himself, he spreads his arms wide and holds on with everything he has. His body strains against the force as the webs stretch to their limits. Slowly, agonizingly, the train grinds to a halt just before catastrophe. Exhausted beyond measure, Peter collapses. The stunned passengers gently catch him and lay him down. Seeing his uncovered face, they're surprised by how young he is. One quietly remarks that he's just a kid. They promise to protect his identity and carefully return his mask, but the moment of peace is short-lived. Dr. Octopus reappears. The passengers stand bravely in his way, shielding the fallen hero, but Otto easily knocks them aside and carries Spider-Man off. He delivers Peter to Harry Osborn in exchange for the tritium. After handing over the rare element, Otto departs. Harry, consumed by revenge, draws a blade and prepares to kill Spider-Man, first removing the mask to see his enemy's face. He's stunned to find Peter. Before Harry can act, Peter regains consciousness and frees himself. He urgently asks where MJ is being held. Harry admits he doesn't know, he only wanted the tritium. Realization hits Peter. Otto is rebuilding the fusion reactor, and MJ is likely at the lab. If activated again, it could destroy half the city. Harry remains bitter, blaming Peter for his father's death, but Peter insists there are greater dangers at stake. Desperate, he rushes off. Spider-Man reaches the rebuilt lab just as Otto activates the unstable reactor once more. The energy core grows violently out of control. Peter frees MJ and briefly incapacitates Otto, but the reaction continues escalating. With no other choice, Peter reveals his identity to Otto. He pleads with him to remember who he once was, a brilliant, compassionate scientist driven by hope, not madness. For a moment, Otto recognizes him. He repeats Peter's earlier description, gifted but unfocused. Then the mechanical arms attempt to seize control again. Peter continues urging him to fight back, to be stronger than the machines. This time, Otto wins the battle within himself. He commands the tentacles to obey. Understanding what must be done, he tells Peter to take MJ and leave. He alone will stop the reaction by pulling the reactor into the river and sacrificing himself. Peter hesitates, but Otto insists. As Peter turns to help MJ, she finally sees his face clearly beneath the mask. The building begins collapsing. Debris crashes down, but Peter catches the falling structure just in time to shield her. Straining to hold it back, he begins to confess his feelings, but he doesn't need to finish. She already knows. Below them, Otto refuses to die as a monster. With resolve, he drags the unstable reactor into the river, submerging it and himself, ending the threat forever. Peter escapes with MJ as the structure sinks into the water. At last, they speak honestly. She admits she always suspected the truth. Peter explains why they can't be together. His life will always be filled with enemies, and he cannot risk her safety. Being Spider-Man means sacrifice. Elsewhere, Harry sits alone in his home when he hears familiar, chilling laughter. The reflection of his father appears in the mirror, urging him to avenge him. Torn between loyalty and vengeance, Harry throws a blade at the mirror, shattering it, and revealing the hidden chamber behind it. Inside lies Norman Osborn's secret arsenal. The Goblin suit, pumpkin bombs, performance enhancers, and the glider. The legacy waits. On her wedding day, MJ makes a final decision. Instead of marrying John, she runs straight to Peter. She tells him she understands the danger and accepts it. It's her choice, and she wants to stand beside him despite the risks. They share a long-awaited kiss. In the distance, a siren wails. MJ smiles and tells him to go. Without hesitation, Spider-Man swings back into the city skyline, toward whatever danger awaits next. Analysis: what if being a hero was the worst thing that ever happened to you? Not because of the villains, not because of the danger, but because it slowly destroys your personal life. That's the beating heart of Spider-Man 2, a sequel that didn't just give us bigger action scenes, it gave us something far more powerful: emotional truth. Most superhero movies are about power. This one is about pressure. Peter Parker isn't living the dream. He's exhausted. He's broke. He's failing his classes. The girl he loves is slipping away. His best friend hates him. And every time he saves the city, his own life falls apart even more. This isn't a story about becoming a hero. It's about questioning whether it's worth being one. And that's exactly why this film stands out, even decades later. While other comic book movies chase spectacle, Spider-Man 2 dares to explore something deeply human. Burnout, doubt, and the crushing weight of responsibility. It asks a question most superhero films avoid. What happens when doing the right thing costs you everything? In this breakdown, we're going to explore why Spider-Man 2 isn't just one of the best superhero sequels ever made. It's one of the most emotionally powerful comic book films of all time. Let's dive in. Released in 2004, Spider-Man 2 arrived at a time when superhero movies were still finding their identity. Directed by visionary filmmaker Sam Raimi, this sequel didn't just aim to be bigger than the first film, it aimed to be deeper. Set once again in the heart of New York City, the story picks up 2 years after Peter Parker first embraced his role as Spider-Man. On the surface, he's the city's friendly neighborhood hero. But beneath the mask, his life is quietly collapsing. Starring Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker, Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane Watson, and Alfred Molina as the brilliant yet tragic Dr. Otto Octavius, the film blends superhero spectacle with intimate character drama. Genre-wise, it's action and adventure, but at its core, it's something more personal. This is a story about responsibility, about sacrifice, about what happens when your greatest strength becomes your greatest burden. Without revealing too much, the premise is simple yet powerful. Peter is struggling to balance his double life. As his personal world crumbles and a dangerous new villain rises, he begins to question whether he can, or even should, continue being Spider-Man. And that question changes everything, because Spider-Man 2 isn't just about stopping a villain, it's about deciding who you are when the mask comes off. On the surface, Spider-Man 2 is a superhero action film. But underneath the web-swinging and explosive battles, it's something much deeper. This isn't just a comic book movie, it's a psychological drama disguised as one. At its core, the film revolves around one powerful theme: responsibility versus desire. Peter Parker doesn't want to be miserable. He doesn't want to miss birthdays, lose jobs, fail classes, or watch the love of his life marry someone else. He wants a normal life, stability, happiness. But every time he moves closer to that life, the city pulls him back, and that tension drives the entire story. Another major theme is burnout. Yes, burnout. Peter is exhausted, mentally, emotionally, physically. His powers literally start failing because he no longer believes in himself. The film cleverly turns his inner crisis into a physical one. When he loses clarity about who he is, he loses his abilities. That's not just superhero logic, that's emotional storytelling. Then there's sacrifice. Every heroic act costs Peter something personal, a relationship, an opportunity, a piece of peace. The movie constantly reminds us. Being a hero isn't glamorous, it's lonely. And standing opposite Peter is Dr. Otto Octavius, a mirror reflection of what Peter could become. Both are brilliant, both are driven by ambition, both suffer loss. But one chooses responsibility and the other chooses obsession. Emotionally, the tone walks a fine line. It's dramatic, sometimes melancholic, yet still infused with humor and heart. It feels grounded, human, real. That's why this film connects beyond comic book fans. Kids see the action, adults feel the struggle. Because at some point in life, everyone understands what it feels like to carry too much and still show up anyway. And that's what makes Spider-Man 2 timeless. Peter Parker is barely holding his life together. He's late to class, late to work, constantly broke. His grades are slipping. His landlord is furious. The girl he loves, Mary Jane, is moving on, and his best friend Harry blames Spider-Man for his father's death. Every time Peter tries to fix one part of his life, something else falls apart, and that's where the story really begins. Meanwhile, a brilliant and ambitious scientist, Dr. Otto Octavius, is on the verge of creating a breakthrough in sustainable fusion energy. To control the experiment, he builds 4 advanced mechanical arms, powered by artificial intelligence and fused directly to his spine. Peter admires him, looks up to him, but during a public demonstration, everything goes wrong. The fusion reactor becomes unstable, the facility explodes, Otto's wife is killed, and the mechanical arms permanently bond to his body, their AI overriding his mind. In that moment, Dr. Octavius dies, and Dr. Octopus is born. As Otto descends into obsession, Peter's internal crisis worsens. The stress, guilt, and self-doubt become so overwhelming that something unthinkable happens. He starts losing his powers, his web won't fire, his strength disappears, his body fails him mid-swing. Doctors can't explain it, but emotionally the reason is clear. He doesn't believe in himself anymore. So Peter makes a decision. He quits. He abandons the Spider-Man suit in an alleyway. He chooses to live as Peter Parker, just Peter. For a short time, life improves. He reconnects with simple joys. He laughs more. He feels lighter. But the world doesn't stop needing Spider-Man. Crime rises, people suffer. And Dr. Octopus resurfaces, demanding rare tritium to rebuild his fusion experiment, no matter the cost. When innocent lives are threatened, Peter faces the truth he's been running from. He can't ignore responsibility. The turning point comes in one of the most iconic sequences in superhero cinema, the train battle. Spider-Man fights Dr. Octopus atop a speeding train, and when the brakes are destroyed, he gives everything, physically and emotionally, to stop it. Web after web, muscle tearing, body trembling. He collapses from exhaustion, arms stretched wide, having saved everyone. The passengers gently carry him inside. They see his face. They realize he's just a young man. And instead of exposing him, they protect him. "You're Spider-Man." "No, he's just a kid." It's a powerful reminder of why he does this. In the final confrontation, Peter doesn't defeat Otto with brute force. He reaches him. He reminds him of the responsibility that comes with intelligence and power. And for a brief moment, Otto regains control. Choosing redemption, he sacrifices himself to destroy the unstable reactor, ending the threat once and for all. But for Peter, the real victory isn't defeating a villain. It's accepting who he truly is, because this story was never just about stopping Dr. Octopus. It was about a young man choosing responsibility, even when it costs him everything. The ending of Spider-Man 2 isn't about victory, it's about acceptance. After the chaos, the destruction, and the emotional collapse, Peter Parker finally faces the truth he's been running from the entire movie. He cannot escape who he is. In the final battle, he doesn't defeat Dr. Octopus with strength alone. He defeats him with conviction. Peter reminds Otto of the very principle that once defined him: intelligence carries responsibility. Power demands sacrifice. And in a moment of clarity, Otto listens. He chooses to end his own creation. He drags the unstable fusion reactor into the river, sacrificing himself to prevent further destruction. It's not just a physical act, it's redemption. A brilliant man reclaiming his humanity in his final moments. But the real resolution happens with Peter. All movie long, he tried to live without the mask. He tried to choose love over duty, peace over pressure, normalcy over heroism. And every time the world reminded him, you don't get that choice. So in the end, Peter makes the hardest decision of all. He embraces the burden, fully, without excuses, without resentment. He tells Mary Jane the truth, not just about being Spider-Man, but about what that life means. The danger, the loneliness, the constant risk, and here's the twist: she chooses him anyway. Mary Jane walks away from a safe, predictable future and runs toward uncertainty, toward sirens, toward chaos, toward a man who may never truly belong to her, because part of him will always belong to the city. The final scene says everything without saying much at all. Peter swings back into action as Spider-Man. Mary Jane stands at the window, watching, not smiling, not carefree, but aware. She understands now. Loving a hero means sharing the sacrifice. The ending isn't triumphant, it's bittersweet. Peter doesn't get freedom, he gets purpose. And that's the message this film leaves us with. Being a hero isn't about winning. It's about choosing responsibility every single day. One of the reasons Spider-Man 2 still feels rich and layered today is because beneath the action, it's packed with symbolism. This isn't just a superhero story, it's visual storytelling at its finest. Let's start with one of the most subtle but powerful metaphors in the film: Peter's glasses. When his confidence begins to crumble, his vision literally blurs. He suddenly doesn't need glasses anymore, not because he's evolving, but because his identity is unstable. When he abandons Spider-Man, his eyesight returns to normal. But the moment he reclaims his purpose, his clarity returns. It's not just about eyesight, it's about self-belief. Then there's the iconic train sequence. When Peter stops the runaway train, his body is stretched forward, arms extended, completely drained, visually echoing a crucifixion pose. It's a clear symbol of sacrifice. He gives everything, not for recognition, not for praise, but because it's the right thing to do. And what happens next? The passengers carry him gently. They protect his identity. They see his vulnerability, and instead of rejecting him, they honor him. That moment isn't just emotional, it's symbolic of faith. Another powerful layer lies in Dr. Octopus himself. Otto's mechanical arms aren't just weapons, they represent unchecked ambition. The AI controlling them whispers logic without morality, its intellect without conscience, and that's what separates Otto from Peter. Both are brilliant, both are driven, both suffer loss, but Peter listens to his conscience. Otto listens to the machine. Even small visual choices reinforce the film's themes. Doorways constantly frame Peter when he's making life-altering decisions. Windows separate him from Mary Jane when he's hiding the truth. Elevation matters. When Peter feels powerless, he's grounded. When he embraces his identity, he's back in the sky. And let's not forget the comic book homage. The scene where Peter throws away the suit in an alley is directly inspired by the classic Spider-Man No More storyline, a powerful nod to longtime fans who understand the emotional weight of that decision. What makes these details special isn't just that they exist, it's that they deepen the story without announcing themselves. You don't have to notice them to feel them, and that's the mark of thoughtful filmmaking. Spider-Man 2 doesn't just tell a story, it layers meaning into every frame, rewarding viewers who look a little closer. What makes Spider-Man 2 even more impressive is what was happening behind the camera. Because as groundbreaking as the movie feels on screen, the effort that went into creating it was just as intense. Let's start with Dr. Octopus. To bring the character to life, Alfred Molina didn't rely purely on CGI. In fact, many of the tentacle scenes were done practically. He wore a massive mechanical harness, weighing over 50 pounds, operated by a team of puppeteers. Each tentacle had its own operator. That means in certain scenes, it took multiple performers working in perfect sync just to move those arms naturally. The result, Dr. Octopus feels physical, heavy, real. Even today, those practical effects hold up beautifully. Now let's talk about the train sequence. That entire scene, the fight on top of a moving train and Spider-Man stopping it, took nearly a year to design and execute. Full train cars were built on massive rigs. Wind machines blasted at extreme speeds. Stunt teams rehearsed for months. And when Spider-Man stretches himself to stop the train, that wasn't just visual drama. It was carefully choreographed physical strain to sell the idea that Peter is giving everything he has left. Director Sam Raimi was determined to keep the emotional storytelling front and center. While studios often push for bigger explosions and faster pacing in sequels, Raimi insisted on focusing on Peter's personal struggle. That's why the quieter scenes, Peter walking alone, missing important moments, sitting in silence feel just as important as the action. Even the famous Spider-Man No More scene, where Peter leaves the suit in the trash, was a direct homage to the classic comic storyline. It wasn't just fan service, it was a meaningful adaptation of one of the character's most iconic arcs. And here's a fun detail: the hospital scene where Dr. Octopus first awakens and the tentacles attack the surgeons. It's filmed like a horror sequence, complete with Raimi's signature style. It's a subtle reminder of his roots in horror filmmaking. What makes all these behind-the-scenes details powerful is this: the film didn't cut corners. It blended practical effects with CGI. It prioritized character over spectacle. It treated a comic book story with emotional seriousness. And that commitment is exactly why Spider-Man 2 still feels authentic, even in an era filled with bigger budgets and more advanced technology. Sometimes, greatness isn't just about what you see on screen. It's about the craftsmanship you don't notice at first glance. To truly understand the greatness of Spider-Man 2, you have to compare it, not just to its predecessor, but to the entire superhero genre. Let's start with the first film in the trilogy, Spider-Man. That movie was about becoming a hero. It gave us the origin, the iconic lesson: with great power comes great responsibility. It was energetic, emotional, and groundbreaking for its time. But Spider-Man 2 asks a much harder question: what happens after the origin story ends? Instead of celebrating heroism, it explores the consequences of it. The first film shows Peter accepting responsibility. The second film shows him drowning under it. That shift in focus makes the sequel feel more mature, more introspective, and arguably more powerful. Now compare it to modern superhero blockbusters. Today's comic book films often lean heavily into large-scale destruction, interconnected universes, and constant spectacle. The stakes are global, sometimes even multiversal. Spider-Man 2 keeps it personal. The city is at risk, yes, but the real conflict is internal. It's about identity, sacrifice, and emotional burnout. The villain isn't just a threat to New York, he's a reflection of Peter's potential downfall. Even when you compare Dr. Octopus to other iconic villains, he stands out. He's not evil for the sake of chaos. He's a man consumed by grief and ambition. His motivations are clear. His tragedy is believable. In many ways, Spider-Man 2 feels closer to character-driven superhero dramas like The Dark Knight, where the psychological weight of heroism is front and center. But here's what Spider-Man 2 arguably does better. It balances heart and humanity without losing warmth. It never becomes cold or overly cynical. It remains hopeful, even in its darkest moments. Of course, it's not flawless. Some viewers today may find the pacing slower compared to rapid-fire modern editing. The early 2000s CGI occasionally shows its age, but what it sacrifices in speed, it gains in soul. And that's why, even after countless superhero films have come and gone, Spider-Man 2 still stands tall. Not because it was the loudest, but because it was one of the most human. When Spider-Man 2 hit theaters in 2004, it wasn't just another summer blockbuster. It became a moment. Critics immediately recognized that this wasn't your typical superhero sequel. Reviews praised its emotional maturity, its character depth, and especially its villain. Many called it one of the rare sequels that surpassed the original, and audiences, they connected with it, not just because of the action, not just because of the iconic train scene, but because Peter Parker felt real. He wasn't invincible. He wasn't confident. He wasn't living a glamorous double life. He was struggling. At the box office, the film was a massive success, earning hundreds of millions worldwide and solidifying Spider-Man as one of the most bankable superheroes of the era. But here's the more interesting question. Is it overrated? Some modern viewers argue that nostalgia plays a role in its legendary status. Compared to today's massive cinematic universes, the scale feels smaller. The pacing feels slower, the visual effects occasionally show their age, and yet people still revisit it, still quote it, still rank it among the greatest superhero films ever made. Why? Because spectacle fades, emotion doesn't. Spider-Man 2 didn't just impress audiences in 2004, it left an imprint. It proved that comic book films could be character studies, that superhero stories could carry genuine dramatic weight. It wasn't divisive. It wasn't controversial, it was respected. And in a genre often driven by hype cycles and short-term trends, that kind of lasting admiration says something powerful. Spider-Man 2 wasn't just well received, it was embraced. So after all the action, after the emotional breakdowns, after the sacrifice, the struggle, the doubt, where does Spider-Man 2 truly stand? Simply put, it stands tall. This is a superhero film with a soul. Its greatest strength isn't the train sequence. It isn't the visual effects. It isn't even Dr. Octopus, as incredible as he is. Its greatest strength is Peter Parker. The film dares to slow down. It allows us to sit with his exhaustion, his loneliness, his fear of losing everything. It treats superhero burnout as something real, something human. That emotional depth is what gives the action weight. Now, is it flawless? Not entirely. Some moments move at a slower pace compared to modern blockbusters. A few visual effects reflect the era it was made in, and viewers expecting non-stop spectacle might find the quieter character scenes less thrilling. But here's the thing. Those quieter scenes are the point. This movie isn't about how strong Spider-Man is. It's about how much he's willing to endure. Who should watch it? If you love character-driven storytelling, if you appreciate villains with emotional complexity, if you want a superhero film that prioritizes heart over hype, this is essential viewing. Even today, especially today, because in a genre that has grown bigger, louder, and more interconnected, Spider-Man 2 reminds us of something simple. The most powerful stories aren't about saving the world. They're about choosing responsibility, even when it costs you everything. And that's why, more than 2 decades later, Spider-Man 2 isn't just remembered, it's respected. REVIWS. If you ever wondered whether a hero can top his first big-screen outing, even one with 8 legs worth of expectations, the second chapter of Spider-Man answers with a confident yes. This follow-up manages the tricky feat of matching, and in many ways surpassing its predecessor. The story dives into darker territory this time. The tragic fate of the scientist's wife, played with quiet dignity by Broadway veteran Donna Murphy, sets the emotional fuse that transforms Dr. Otto Octavius into the formidable Doc Ock Alfred Molina. His grief-fueled vendetta brings him into direct conflict with Peter Parker/Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, and the stakes quickly become personal, especially when danger creeps far too close to Aunt May Rosemary Harris. Once again, Harris gives the character warmth and resilience, proving that no umbrella-wielding grandmother has ever been quite so heroic. The film opens on a somber note, with Peter at rock bottom. He's barely holding his life together, scrambling to deliver pizzas on time, enduring the scorn of impatient bosses, and trying unsuccessfully to keep up with the ordinary world while carrying extraordinary responsibility. Lighthearted moments soften the gloom, awkward reactions to Spider-Man's moonlighting job, mishaps involving his costume and laundry, and Peter's frantic dash to catch a performance of The Importance of Being Earnest, starring his complicated love interest Mary Jane, Kirsten Dunst. Yet beneath the humor lies genuine melancholy, as Peter begins to realize that being a hero may cost him everything he cherishes. What makes this installment resonate is its balance. High-octane spectacle shares the screen with quiet reflection and emotional reckoning. Peter questions whether he can continue living a double life, and the film gives him space to mature. Supporting characters remain consistent and layered. James Franco brings intensity as Harry Osborn, still wrestling with resentment, while J.K. Simmons once again nearly steals every scene as the blustering newspaper editor whose tirades double as comic gold. Even small recurring gags and background touches add personality and rhythm. Director Sam Raimi appears far more confident here. Where the first film sometimes felt carefully guided by studio expectations, this sequel feels unmistakably personal. Raimi injects flair into the action and even nods to his horror roots during a tense hospital sequence that brims with eerie energy. Familiar faces return, including a brief but memorable appearance by Willem Dafoe, creating a strong sense of continuity. The romance between Peter and Mary Jane carries greater emotional weight this time, feeling less tentative and more urgent. Maguire and Dunst settle comfortably into their roles, while Molina's Doc Ock emerges as more than a typical villain, imposing, yes, but also deeply human. The screenplay ensures that no character feels one-dimensional. Everyone has motives, flaws, and emotional texture. Of course, the true showstoppers are the action sequences. The visual effects elevate Spider-Man's web swinging to exhilarating new heights, making his flight through the city feel breathtakingly real. The battles between Spidey and Doc Ock are inventive and pulse-pounding, culminating in a spectacular showdown aboard a speeding train, a sequence that blends spectacle, tension, and cinematic artistry in perfect harmony. Despite its generous runtime, the film rarely drags. It combines humor, heartbreak, heroism, and spectacle into a cohesive whole that rewards repeat viewings. By the final frame, anticipation for the next chapter feels inevitable. In short, this second entry doesn't just continue the story, it deepens it. By allowing Peter Parker to confront the emotional cost of heroism while delivering unforgettable action, the film proves that sometimes a sequel can swing just as high as the original, if not higher. Spider-Man 2 centers heavily on Peter Parker's fragile mental and emotional state. The entire narrative feels shaped by his internal struggle. He's torn between responsibility and personal happiness, constantly questioning what path would truly benefit both himself and the people he cares about. Interestingly, much of the film unfolds with Peter out of the suit, which gives this installment a noticeably different and more introspective atmosphere compared to a standard superhero spectacle. The script devotes considerable time to developing its supporting cast as well. Their personal arcs are not just background noise, they contribute meaningfully to Peter's conflict. That said, when the film does shift gears into action, it delivers in a big way. The standout sequence aboard the speeding train near the climax is particularly gripping and remains one of the franchise's most memorable set pieces. Performance-wise, Tobey Maguire convincingly captures Parker's vulnerability and exhaustion, while James Franco gets more room to explore the complexities of Peter's best friend. Kirsten Dunst brings emotional sincerity to Mary Jane, and Rosemary Harris once again adds warmth and dignity in her role. As for the antagonist, Alfred Molina gives a strong performance, but the character himself doesn't feel quite as compelling as the villain from the previous installment. That comparison may be tough to escape. Even so, Spider-Man 2 stands as one of the stronger comic book adaptations of its era. It may not deliver exactly what every viewer hopes for, but what it offers is thoughtful and polished. The dramatic elements arguably work better here than in the trilogy's third entry, though at times the emotional weight feels slightly overextended, especially on repeat viewings. Still, the actors manage to sell even some of the clunkier lines of dialogue, which speaks to their commitment. The action scenes are competently staged and visually impressive, without necessarily reinventing the genre. The ending clearly sets the stage for the next chapter, leaving audiences eager to see what follows. However, the pacing can feel drawn out, particularly in the extended cut. Certain added moments, like the prolonged elevator bit, don't quite land, whereas smaller character-focused scenes, such as Peter's interactions involving the Spider-Man suit in his workplace, feel more worthwhile. There are also several overly convenient reveal moments that stretch believability, even within the film's own established reality. Still, fans of the first movie will likely want to continue the journey and form their own opinions about its themes of sacrifice, identity, and responsibility. The plot finds Peter struggling on all fronts. As he attempts to balance school, work, rent, and his duties as Spider-Man, his life begins to unravel. Meanwhile, Dr. Otto Octavius, played by Alfred Molina, becomes the villainous Dr. Octopus after a failed fusion experiment leaves him controlled by his mechanical arms. Peter must face this new threat while coping with Mary Jane's impending marriage to the son of newspaper publisher J. Jonah Jameson, a long-standing critic of Spider-Man. Financial troubles plague Aunt May, Peter's grades suffer, and everything seems to collapse at once. Released 2 years after the original, this second chapter in Sam Raimi's trilogy earned widespread acclaim, even winning an Academy Award for its visual effects and ranking among the highest-grossing films of its release year. The story mirrors the first film in some ways. Once again, a brilliant scientist with a personal connection to Peter falls victim to tragedy and transforms into an adversary. Although Dr. Octopus is a solid villain in his own right, he doesn't quite match the intensity of the Green Goblin from the previous film. Mary Jane's romantic arc feels somewhat repetitive at this point, and certain plot choices, like her high-profile wedding build-up, can come across as excessive. The final wedding scene leans heavily into melodrama, and some of the closing lines border on overly sentimental. Maguire delivers a respectable performance, especially in portraying Peter's faltering powers and self-doubt. Even if he may not fit the traditional superhero mold, he convincingly embodies a young man overwhelmed by responsibility. At times, though, it's surprising that Peter survives some of the physical impacts he endures while supposedly powerless. Overall, Spider-Man 2 remains a strong sequel with an engaging story and impressive visual effects. While not flawless, it succeeds in deepening its characters and exploring the cost of heroism. My rating, 8 out of 10. Revisiting Spider-Man 2 in 2024, right after rewatching Spider-Man, felt like stepping back into the early days of modern superhero cinema. Directed by Sam Raimi, this sequel doesn't just build on the first film. In many ways, it deepens the emotional weight and sharpens the character arcs. 2 years after the fall of the Green Goblin, Peter Parker is struggling. The city still needs Spider-Man, but being a hero comes at a steep personal cost. His grades slip, his job is unstable, his relationships are strained, and even his powers begin to falter. The burden of living two lives pushes him toward a breaking point. For once, he asks himself whether he's allowed to simply be Peter. At the same time, brilliant scientist Dr. Otto Octavius, played with nuance and intensity by Alfred Molina, watches his life unravel after a failed fusion experiment claims his wife and leaves his mechanical arms fused to his body. With his restraint gone and his ambition unchecked, he descends into chaos, funding a second attempt at his reactor through crime. The tragedy behind his transformation gives the villain unexpected emotional depth. The same complexity can be said for Molina's portrayal. He brings both menace and sorrow to the role. Tobey Maguire returns as Peter Parker and once again anchors the film with sincerity. His portrayal emphasizes vulnerability as much as heroism, making Peter's internal conflict believable and heartfelt. Familiar faces like Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, J.K. Simmons, and Rosemary Harris reprise their roles, and their continued presence strengthens the sense of continuity. Harris, in particular, delivers several standout moments, including a powerful fire rescue sequence that echoes danger from the first film but raises the stakes in a more genuine and urgent way. The film also expands the circle of people who discover Spider-Man's identity: train passengers, Mary Jane, Harry, and possibly Aunt May, adding emotional consequences to Peter's choices. The famous train scene remains one of the most memorable sequences in superhero cinema, balancing spectacle with humanity. Franco's final scene, alongside the lingering shadow of Willem Dafoe, works almost like a prologue for what follows in the trilogy. While the story carries heavy themes, it doesn't forget to have fun. A particularly memorable comedic beat comes when Peter celebrates the return of his powers with an overconfident "I'm back," only for his back to immediately give out. Of course, much of the consistent humor comes from Daily Bugle editor J. Jonah Jameson. Simmons' performance is so definitive that it's hard to imagine anyone else in the role. His portrayal became iconic enough to define the character for a generation. The film even experiments musically, featuring two creative variations of the Spider-Man theme, one appearing mid-film and another during the end credits performed by Michael Bublé. Visually, the CGI is a step up from the 2002 installment. While some effects reveal their age nearly 20 years later, the action sequences, especially the train battle, still hold up remarkably well. Considering the era in which it was made, the visual work remains impressive and effective. Spider-Man 2 succeeds because it focuses just as much on the man behind the mask as the spectacle around him. It balances action, humor, tragedy, and heart in a way many blockbusters still struggle to achieve. If you've never seen it, start with the 2002 original to fully appreciate the character arcs. But if you already know the story, this is one of those rare sequels that rewards repeat viewings. A strong continuation of the story, and absolutely worth watching again. 2 hours after it began, I walked out of the theater having experienced one of the most purely entertaining blockbuster rides I'm likely to see this year. The story comfortably sustains its runtime, and despite noticeable pauses between the major action set pieces, I never found myself disengaged. Even when the pace eases slightly, the film remains compelling. What truly elevates the movie is the layered portrayal of its central hero. He isn't a triumphant, eager savior. He's reluctant, burdened, and visibly worn down by responsibility. That emotional strain gives the character real depth. Even the romantic subplot involving Mary Jane, which could easily have felt heavy-handed, works reasonably well and adds to the personal stakes rather than dragging the narrative down. The antagonist mirrors the tragic dimension of the previous film's villain. Like before, we're presented with a brilliant scientist whose descent into madness is driven by intrusive voices. He's someone we want stopped, yet we can't entirely help but sympathize with him. He feels more tragic than outright evil. While Willem Dafoe delivered a memorable performance previously, despite being somewhat restricted by an awkward costume, Alfred Molina benefits from a more expressive role here. He handles the voice's scenes with conviction and avoids tipping into parody. It's unfortunate, however, that he spends so much of his screen time as a spectacle of destruction rather than as a fully explored human being. With such emotionally textured characters at its core, it's no surprise the screenplay feels stronger than what we typically expect from a summer action spectacle. There's thematic weight beneath the surface if you care to look for it. One particularly striking moment, New Yorkers carrying Spider-Man's unconscious body through a train car, feels loaded with meaning. Following a massive effects-heavy sequence, the sudden tenderness of that scene adds unexpected poignancy. Tonally, the film strikes an effective balance. It blends humor, heartfelt drama, character-driven moments, and naturally explosive chaos, complete with vehicles crashing through windows. And let's be honest, those adrenaline-fueled moments are part of why we bought a ticket in the first place. The action sequences themselves are on another level compared to the first installment. The combat feels more intense, largely due to the close-quarters nature of the confrontations. The visual effects have also seen a major upgrade. While you can still occasionally tell the difference between practical footage and CGI, the digital work is far more convincing and seamlessly integrated. Unlike certain moments in the original film that resembled mid-2000s video game graphics, the effects here feel impactful and immersive. Much of the credit belongs to Sam Raimi's direction. He handles quieter character scenes with confidence, but he truly shines when orchestrating large-scale chaos. His flair is unmistakable, particularly in a sequence that nods to his earlier horror work. The hospital scene, where Dr. Octopus' mechanical arms first run wild, echoes elements of The Evil Dead with its frantic intensity and dark humor. It's surprisingly visceral for a PG rating and serves as a reminder that the classification board isn't always as restrictive as some critics suggest. The cast delivers solid performances across the board. Tobey Maguire convincingly balances the awkward humor, romantic tension, moral conflict, and physical demands of the role. He embodies the relatable, everyday hero the story requires. Kirsten Dunst has expressed interest in tackling a wider range of roles, and it's easy to understand why. While she makes the most of her scenes, her character is somewhat underutilized. Alfred Molina, though limited in emotional spotlight moments compared to his predecessor's iconic mirror scene, still provides a strong performance. If the character doesn't fully land emotionally, it's more due to limited development than any shortcoming on his part. James Franco delivers a competent performance, though his character feels somewhat one-note. Considering how crucial he may become in future installments, there's room and need for greater depth moving forward. Overall, the film succeeds as an exhilarating, emotionally textured blockbuster. It may not aspire to high art, but as a thrilling cinematic ride with heart, humor, and spectacle, it more than delivers. Among the supporting players, it's once again J.K. Simmons who completely dominates whenever he's on screen. His performance is gloriously over the top in the best possible way. What surprised me most is that I never once thought of his intense role from Oz while watching him here, something I didn't think was possible. He manages to shake that image entirely and replace it with something outrageously funny. The brief appearances from Bruce Campbell, Sam Raimi, and Willem Dafoe are fun little bonuses that add flavor without overstaying their welcome. This isn't a flawless film by any stretch, and I'm still a bit puzzled by its lofty ranking on various greatest lists. That said, it accomplishes exactly what it sets out to do, and it does so with more style and confidence than many of the year's other big-budget spectacles. The writing is sharp and engaging, the characters feel layered, and the film balances humor and action impressively well. The visual effects are noticeably improved, and some of the action set pieces are genuinely thrilling. In a summer crowded with mediocrity, this one stands tall. That said, I do have questions. For starters, who approved the idea of a 77-year-old woman dangling from one of Doc Ock's mechanical arms while he scales a skyscraper? Was nobody concerned about her having a heart attack? And then she somehow manages to cling to a ledge using a wooden cane. I know we're in comic book territory, but even fantasy needs a sliver of plausibility. Speaking of Doc Ock, was he an awesome villain or kind of ridiculous? I'm still undecided. Alfred Molina certainly commits to the role, and the concept works on paper. 4 mechanical arms fused to a brilliant but unstable scientist. The CGI that brings those tentacles to life is technically impressive, especially during the wall-crawling and large-scale destruction scenes. But at times he borders on cartoonish. Maybe that's intentional. maybe it's just the nature of the character. A few other moments made me raise an eyebrow, like the scene where a garbage collector turns in a discarded Spider-Man suit and J. Jonah Jameson immediately splashes it across the front page. Couldn't it have been a knockoff, a Halloween costume? Still, it sets up that wonderfully tongue-in-cheek "he's back" headline, complete with Spidey bursting through the newspaper for his triumphant return. That bit was undeniably fun. Less successful, in my opinion, was the use of "Raindrops Keep Fallin' on My Head" during Peter Parker's soul-searching montage. That song is forever tied to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid for me. Peter's ongoing internal struggle, balancing responsibility, romance, and identity, has always been central to the character. The comics thrived on the idea of a young hero trying to figure himself out. Maybe I'm just aging out of the teenage angst angle. After all, I was barely entering my teens when Stan Lee first introduced Spider-Man. If I'm missing the point, I'll own that. I did appreciate the small, human touches, like Peter asking Aunt May about his old comic collection. That hit close to home. My own stash disappeared while I was away at college, including a well-worn Justice League #1 and a Green Lantern #5. It took me decades to fully accept that loss. I don't mean to sound overly critical. I genuinely enjoyed the movie. It's fun to nitpick. I was glad to see Stan Lee pop up again, this time heroically pulling someone out of harm's way during one of the high-altitude battles. And when Spider-Man finally defeats Doc Ock, I couldn't help but notice a bit of classic 1960s Star Trek logic sneaking into the resolution. The kind Captain Kirk used to short-circuit a computer or talk a villain into reconsidering their life choices. As the Evil Dead series proved, Sam Raimi understands how to craft a sequel that builds rather than repeats. This film confirms that skill. We get Peter Parker, Tobey Maguire, struggling with responsibility while facing off against Otto Octavius, Alfred Molina, all while trying to win back Mary Jane Watson, Kirsten Dunst. Yes, it's a sequel, and yes, there's always the risk of rehashing familiar beats. But this installment manages to expand the world and raise the emotional stakes without feeling like a retread. In the end, it may not be perfect, but it's ambitious, entertaining, and often genuinely exciting. And that's more than can be said for many superhero films that followed. I'll admit that Dr. Octopus doesn't quite radiate the same pure nightmare fuel as the Green Goblin did in the first film, but make no mistake, he's still a formidable and dangerous adversary. I wouldn't go so far as to label this sequel a flawless masterpiece, yet Sam Raimi clearly hasn't run out of creativity. Borrowing a sentiment from the original story's moral core, he continues to explore the burden that comes with extraordinary ability. Much of the original ensemble returns. James Franco, Rosemary Harris, J.K. Simmons, and even Bruce Campbell pop back in, and their presence helps maintain continuity. Overall, it's an entertaining ride. The first Spider-Man movie set a high bar. This follow-up, however, feels like a sequel that occasionally tries to juggle too many ideas at once. Ironically, in attempting to expand the scope, it sometimes loses focus. The latter half is undeniably thrilling, packed with large-scale action and crowd-pleasing moments. The problem is that it takes a while to reach that point. The opening hour drifts through inside jokes and scenes that don't always move the plot forward. That said, I can't criticize the performances. Tobey Maguire appears more confident in the dual role, and Kirsten Dunst brings greater nuance to Mary Jane, especially within their uncertain, are they or aren't they, romance. In terms of spectacle, the action scenes might be the strongest of the trilogy, but that slow build does test patience. Peter Parker is still wrestling with the emotional fallout from Uncle Ben's death. The guilt weighs on him so heavily that it begins interfering with his powers, almost as if his confidence has short-circuited his abilities. Meanwhile, brilliant scientist Otto Octavius suffers a catastrophic lab accident involving a fusion experiment, fusing him with 4 advanced mechanical arms equipped with artificial intelligence. The result, a once-idealistic researcher transformed into a tragic and increasingly unstable threat to New York City. This second chapter in Raimi's blockbuster trilogy once again balances superhero spectacle with heartfelt drama. Maguire and Dunst reprise their roles with greater maturity, while Raimi directs with his trademark flair, blending humor, emotion, and high-stakes chaos. Alfred Molina stands out as Dr. Octopus, delivering a layered performance that makes the villain more than just a metal-armed menace. The visual effects team deserves credit as well, bringing the mechanical limbs convincingly to life. Ironically, though the film's ambition sometimes works against it, the reliance on CGI can occasionally stretch credibility, even by comic book standards. Picking up shortly after the events of the 2002 film, Peter is attempting to balance hero work with the everyday struggles of rent, deadlines, and underwhelming jobs, pizza deliveries included. His friend Harry Osborn continues to mourn his father while nurturing resentment towards Spider-Man, unaware of Peter's secret identity. A meeting with Dr. Octavius, arranged through Harry's company, leads to the experiment that changes everything. After the accident, Octavius spirals into destructive obsession, and Peter begins questioning whether being Spider-Man has brought him anything but hardship. Should he walk away from the mask? Stepping down might make life easier. His editor J. Jonah Jameson would probably celebrate, but it would also remove his main source of income, not to mention leave the city unprotected. Aunt May's financial troubles only add to his burden. Peter's life is a constant balancing act, and the tension feels real, as Doc Ock forges a dangerous alliance with Harry, offering Spider-Man in exchange for rare materials to complete his unstable energy project. The stakes escalate. The villain edges closer to discovering Peter's identity, putting everyone he cares about in jeopardy. While the film starts slowly, once it finds its momentum, it delivers explosive action, emotional stakes, and some sharp comedic moments, particularly from Simmons' endlessly entertaining newspaper editor. It may not surpass the freshness of the original, but it remains a bold, energetic, and memorable chapter in the trilogy. Tobey Maguire carries the emotional weight of the film with quiet confidence, while director Sam Raimi wisely uses visual effects as a storytelling tool rather than letting them dominate the narrative. The climax, in particular, balances spectacle with character, turning what could have been just another superhero showdown into something closer to a coming-of-age drama in disguise. Backed by Danny Elfman's instantly recognizable score, the film delivers a polished big-screen experience that, in certain ways, even surpasses its predecessor. At its core, this sequel digs into the less glamorous side of heroism. Peter Parker discovers that saving the city doesn't exactly help with rent. Early on, he's barely hanging on to employment, juggling pizza deliveries with crime-fighting duties, a scenario that humorously highlights how impractical superhero life can be. It may even mark one of the more grounded and slightly pathetic portrayals of a masked hero struggling to survive. Yet despite its strengths, the film often feels weighed down by its own emotional baggage. A mid-film montage set to "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head" adds a quirky touch, but the overall tone remains heavy. Peter confesses lingering guilt to Aunt May over Uncle Ben's death and is met with rejection. Mary Jane is engaged to another man. His vision falters. His confidence crumbles. The press brands him a masked menace, and the public that once cheered him begins to turn. It's a story filled with personal setbacks, sometimes to the point of exhaustion. The introduction of Dr. Octavius, portrayed by Alfred Molina, provides the central conflict. With 4 mechanical tentacles fused to his spine, each moving with unsettling autonomy, he's visually striking and undeniably formidable. However, making him nearly as powerful as Spider-Man somewhat undercuts the hero's uniqueness. The action scenes, particularly those placing Peter's loved ones in peril, lean heavily into CGI spectacle. While thrilling, they occasionally tip toward excess. Maguire remains an unconventional leading man, understated, soft-spoken, and often appearing half-lost in thought. Still, he shines in a standout moment late in the film as he desperately attempts to halt a runaway subway train. Raimi sprinkles in flashes of visual brilliance throughout, but not every sequence lands smoothly. Scenes at the Daily Bugle feel oddly flat, character motivations blur, and some dramatic beats lack clarity. Even the final teaser setting up the next installment feels somewhat forced. As is often said about trilogies, the second chapter can be the most challenging and sometimes the weakest. While Spider-Man 2 stumbles in places, it's far from a failure. Personally, I've enjoyed both Spider-Man films. They're entertaining and visually impressive, though not necessarily something I'd revisit often. The web-swinging sequences between skyscrapers are exhilarating, and this time around, the effects are noticeably improved. The motion feels more natural and less artificial than in the first movie. The exhilaration the filmmakers intended is finally fully realized. Dr. Octopus stands out as one of the film's highlights. Molina brings depth and presence to the role, making him a more refined and menacing antagonist than the Green Goblin in the previous entry. There's even a hospital escape scene that subtly channels Raimi's horror roots, with hints reminiscent of his earlier work, adding a darkly playful edge. However, the romantic subplot weighs the film down. There's simply too much focus on Mary Jane and Peter's relationship. While some emotional grounding is necessary, the sheer amount of screen time devoted to their back and forth slows the pacing and drifts away from what makes Spider-Man compelling in the comics, his battles against memorable villains. A tighter focus on hero versus adversary would have strengthened the film considerably. In the end, Spider-Man 2 succeeds in technical craftsmanship and delivers several memorable action sequences. It improves visually and deepens its characters, even if it sometimes loses momentum in melodrama. It may not be flawless, but it remains an ambitious and often thrilling superhero sequel. There are several elements that make Spider-Man 2 such an entertaining experience, even though it follows narrative beats that audiences have encountered countless times in Hollywood, whether in comic book adaptations or other mainstream films. What helps distinguish it is the steady stream of humor that balances out the romantic tension and personal drama. A large part of that credit goes to J.K. Simmons, whose expanded role as the loud, sharp-tongued newspaper editor injects lively comedic energy into the film. There are also amusing moments tied to the everyday struggles of being a masked hero, along with a few playful cameo appearances from familiar collaborators of the director. The lead performances are solid, though not dramatically improved from the previous installment. At times, the dialogue they are given doesn't quite land as effectively as it should. Some lines embrace a deliberate cheesiness that fits the comic book tone, while others feel unintentionally awkward. Among the cast, Rosemary Harris stands out as Aunt May, delivering one of the film's most heartfelt and emotionally grounded performances. So is Spider-Man 2 truly one of the greatest sequels in superhero films ever made, as many claim? In my view, it comes very close. In fact, the movie becomes even more engaging upon repeat viewings, especially in the way it embraces its comic book spirit while still feeling thoughtful and character-driven. It succeeds as a mainstream action film with emotional depth, and much like Sam Raimi's Evil Dead trilogy did for horror, this installment has a staying power that may outlast many other superhero entries in the long run. I didn't see the first Spider-Man when it debuted in 2002. However, after a friend convinced me to watch Spider-Man 2 in theaters, I found myself genuinely impressed. I was surprised to learn that Sam Raimi directed both films, but discovering later that he is a passionate admirer of the original comic series made perfect sense. His enthusiasm for the material shines through, and it gives the movie an authenticity that elevates it beyond a standard blockbuster. One of the film's greatest strengths is its humor, which runs consistently throughout the dialogue and is especially prominent in J.K. Simmons' scenes. The special effects are also impressive, used with restraint and primarily during action-heavy sequences. Importantly, these spectacle-driven moments never overshadow the emotional core of the story. This is not a non-stop action feature. Instead, Raimi chooses to focus on Peter Parker's inner turmoil. Rather than portraying him as a flawless hero, the film presents Peter as an awkward young man struggling to reconcile his personal life with his responsibilities as Spider-Man. He is conflicted, uncertain, and often overwhelmed. By emphasizing this vulnerability, Raimi avoids common superhero cliches and delivers a more layered human portrayal of a costumed savior. Casting plays a major role in the film's effectiveness. Tobey Maguire brings sincerity and quiet intensity to Peter Parker, making him both relatable and sympathetic. Kirsten Dunst adds warmth and emotional presence, while Alfred Molina's portrayal of the ambitious scientist-turned-villain adds weight to the central conflict. Though the storyline follows a somewhat familiar formula, a brilliant scientist misuses his groundbreaking discovery in a bid for control, leaving Spider-Man as the city's only hope. The execution keeps it compelling. There are minor flaws. At times, the airborne sequences resemble scenes lifted from a video game, and the narrative structure adheres closely to traditional Hollywood storytelling patterns. The romantic resolution between Peter and Mary Jane may also feel predictable. Even so, these shortcomings do little to diminish the overall enjoyment. With a simple plan in 1998, Raimi demonstrated his skill in crafting intense thrillers. With Spider-Man 2, he proves that he can bring similar depth and control to the superhero genre. Its commercial success only reinforces that achievement. If a third installment follows, one can only hope Raimi continues at the helm. As for me, watching this sequel was enough to make me curious about going back and experiencing the first film as well. When a follow-up film actually improves on the original, it feels like a small miracle. That's exactly what happens here. The filmmakers clearly doubled down on what worked the first time, bringing back director Sam Raimi and the core cast, and investing heavily in elevating every aspect of the production. One noticeable improvement lies in the visual effects. While the first movie occasionally made the jump between live action and CGI a bit too obvious, the sequel blends these elements with greater fluidity. The transitions feel more organic, especially during large-scale action sequences. The real standout, however, is the introduction of Dr. Octopus, portrayed by Alfred Molina. His mechanical tentacles aren't just technically impressive, they're expressive and intimidating, making the character both a visual spectacle and a compelling antagonist. The design and execution of the costume and effects work are among the film's biggest triumphs. The story leans deeply into Peter Parker's struggles. We spend considerable time watching him juggle financial hardship, academic trouble, strained friendships, and emotional confusion. While this is central to the character's identity, some viewers may feel that the film lingers a bit too long on his misfortunes. Tobey Maguire continues to embody Peter with sincerity and vulnerability. Opposite him, Kirsten Dunst returns as Mary Jane Watson. Their relationship remains a key emotional thread, though the young love dynamic begins to feel slightly stretched. It raises interesting questions about how the series might evolve their bond moving forward, especially since Peter's emotional state seems closely tied to his abilities. Unlike many comic book antagonists, Otto Octavius isn't evil for the sake of spectacle. His tragic descent adds emotional weight, and Melina brings nuance to the role. Meanwhile, James Franco reprises his role as Harry Osborn, quietly setting the stage for future conflict and hinting at a darker transformation ahead. At its core, the film explores a powerful dilemma. Should Peter choose a normal life, one free of danger and full of personal happiness, or embrace the exhausting responsibility of being Spider-Man? The tension between these two paths drives the narrative. The action scenes are undeniably strong, particularly the unforgettable train sequence, but the romantic subplot occasionally overshadows the superhero spectacle. For viewers craving non-stop thrills, the emotional focus might feel excessive. The balance between heartfelt drama and high-stakes action doesn't always land perfectly. Following the enormous success of the first film, this sequel drew massive global audiences and further cemented Spider-Man's place in modern cinema. Drawing inspiration from the classic comic storyline Spider-Man No More from the Amazing Spider-Man number 5052, the film recreates the iconic image of Peter abandoning his suit in a moment of despair. It's a powerful visual metaphor that longtime fans immediately recognize. Ultimately, Spider-Man 2 is a strong sequel, ambitious, emotional, and visually impressive. It may not achieve perfection, but it builds meaningfully on what came before. While the heavy romantic focus slightly slows its momentum, the film remains engaging and rewatchable, a sequel that dares to deepen its hero instead of simply enlarging the explosions. Set 2 years after Spider-Man's battle with the Green Goblin, the story follows Peter Parker as he struggles to balance his responsibilities as a superhero with the fragile pieces of his personal life. Victory over his former enemy hasn't made things easier. In fact, Peter seems more overwhelmed than ever. Trying to live as both a college student and New York's protector proves exhausting. His heroic commitments constantly cost him jobs because he's always late. His grades continue to slip, and he can't seem to be the supportive nephew Aunt May needs, while she copes with financial hardship and the lingering grief of Uncle Ben's death. To make matters worse, Peter keeps his distance from Mary Jane Watson, Kirsten Dunst, suppressing his feelings in an attempt to protect her from the dangers tied to his secret identity. Meanwhile, Harry Osborn, James Franco, grows increasingly bitter, blaming Spider-Man for his father's death. Their friendship becomes strained as resentment replaces loyalty. At the same time, a new threat emerges in the form of Dr. Otto Octavius, Alfred Molina. Once a visionary scientist, Octavius suffers a catastrophic lab accident that fuses mechanical arms to his body. The tragedy not only takes his wife's life, but also fractures his sanity, as the AI-controlled tentacles influence his thoughts. Driven by obsession, he becomes determined to complete his failed experiment, no matter the cost. Unlike many blockbuster sequels that lean heavily on spectacle, director Sam Raimi avoids excess. Instead, he deepens the emotional stakes. The film expands Peter's internal conflict, his tug-of-war between ordinary youth and extraordinary responsibility. The action sequences are thrilling and memorable, but they never overshadow the character-driven storytelling. Spider-Man 2 elevates its core cast and presents a far more layered antagonist in Dr. Octopus. Raimi and the writers skillfully blend comic book faithfulness with cinematic drama, offering something for devoted fans and casual viewers alike. Action, humor, romance, and suspense are balanced with surprising maturity. The film's real strength lies in portraying Peter as deeply human, torn between adolescence and adulthood, desire and duty. The subplots introduced in the first installment gain emotional weight here. Peter and Harry's friendship teeters on collapse. Mary Jane's relationship with astronaut John Jameson moves toward marriage, forcing Peter to confront the possibility of losing her forever. Aunt May and Peter share a powerful conversation about Uncle Ben's death, adding emotional resonance. All of this unfolds alongside Spider-Man's growing struggle to maintain his dual identity. The film's opening credits cleverly pay tribute to both the comic book roots and the previous movie, blending illustrated imagery with iconic moments. One subtle but effective transition shows Mary Jane's face on a giant advertisement while Peter, unable to fully let go, can't help but glance at it. Comedy plays a stronger role this time, especially in the first half. Peter's job at the pizza shop provides several standout moments, particularly the chaotic delivery sequence that ends in embarrassment and unpaid wages. His interactions with Mr. Az's, the impatient shop owner, add lighthearted tension. Another unforgettable scene takes place in an elevator, where a powerless Spider-Man awkwardly stands beside a civilian, both unsure how to address the absurd situation. It's a brilliantly understated gag. Humor continues through scenes of Peter strolling through campus to Raindrops Keep Fallin' on My Head, reflecting his temporary relief from responsibility. At Mary Jane's party, Peter repeatedly fails to grab a drink, symbolizing how life constantly slips through his fingers. And of course, J. Jonah Jameson, portrayed flawlessly by Jake Simmons, delivers sharp comedic timing, stealing every scene he appears in. Although the jokes are more frequent than in the first film, they never undermine the sense of adventure. Instead, they enhance the emotional rhythm of the story. Spider-Man 2 stands as a rare sequel that improves upon its predecessor, combining heart, spectacle, and character development into a film that feels both grand and deeply personal. The action sequences in this sequel feel noticeably more ambitious and visually expansive than those in the first installment. Sam Raimi had already mastered the delicate balance between comic book storytelling and cinematic language in the original film, and here he builds upon that foundation. With significantly improved technology just 2 years later, once again supervised by visual effects legend John Dykstra, the film achieves a new level of spectacle and realism. Raimi chooses to stage many of Spider-Man's major action moments at night, enhancing the dramatic atmosphere while maintaining his signature use of dynamic close-up shots and constantly moving camera work. The visual effects deserve special praise. They surpass those of the first film in fluidity and believability, giving the action a convincing weight and momentum. The bank battle between Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus, their vertigo-inducing struggle high above New York's skyline with Aunt May in danger, the intense subway sequence, and the climactic finale all showcase how effectively CGI is integrated into the storytelling. Dr. Octopus himself represents a major step forward in villain design. Unlike the rigid armor of the Green Goblin in the previous film, Doc Ock's mechanical arms move with terrifying precision and life, making him far more intimidating. It's no surprise that the visual effects team, led by John Dykstra, earned the Academy Award in 2005. However, while the technical execution shines, certain narrative elements feel somewhat recycled. Mary Jane once again finds herself in peril and becomes central to the final act, her life threatened just as before. Aunt May is also placed in danger by the main villain, and even a building fire reminiscent of the 2002 film makes a return. These repetitions slightly diminish the sense of originality in otherwise important moments. Fortunately, the film quickly regains its momentum. The spectacular subway sequence, the car crashing into the cafe, and the breathtaking fights atop skyscrapers are exhilarating, especially with Raimi's effective use of slow motion at key dramatic beats. In the subway scene in particular, Spider-Man must stop a runaway train, pushing himself beyond his limits to save the passengers. When his mask is burned away and his identity is accidentally revealed, the passengers gently carry the exhausted hero back inside the train. One of them remarks, "He's just a kid," perfectly capturing the audience's own realization that beneath the mask is a fragile teenager bearing enormous responsibility. Even more powerful is the moment when the passengers promise to protect his secret and respectfully return his mask, a quiet but moving affirmation that they truly see him as a hero. The romantic subplot also carries emotional weight. Mary Jane's attempt to recreate the iconic upside-down kiss with her current boyfriend reveals her lingering feelings for Peter when she realizes it simply isn't the same. Later, after leaving her astronaut fiancé at the altar, she chooses Peter despite knowing the risks involved in loving Spider-Man. The film closes their reunion with a close, anxious look on Mary Jane's face as she watches Peter leave once more to save the city, a poignant reminder that loving a hero comes with constant uncertainty. From a technical standpoint, the film operates in remarkable harmony. Bill Pope's cinematography, Neil Spisek's art direction, and Bob Murawski's editing blend seamlessly to translate comic book aesthetics onto the big screen in a way rarely achieved. Danny Elfman returns to compose the score, once again delivering sweeping themes that elevate both the action and the romance. His music reinforces familiar motifs while adding emotional depth, resulting in a soundtrack that is both powerful and memorable. Despite some narrative repetition, Raimi wisely avoids retelling the hero's origin story and instead plunges viewers straight into the conflict. In doing so, Spider-Man 2 demonstrates maturity and confidence. The film embraces spectacle without allowing special effects to overshadow its emotional core, striking a thoughtful balance between superhero thrills and human vulnerability. At its core, this sequel thrives on character-driven storytelling. Director Sam Raimi once again proves that spectacle means little without emotional stakes. The film blends action, humor, romance, and social commentary in a way few modern superhero movies manage. It's a large-scale blockbuster that still finds time for intimate moments, and that balance is what makes it endure. Yes, the recurring turbulence between Peter Parker and Mary Jane can feel repetitive. Their cycle of longing, separation, and misunderstanding is emphasized heavily, perhaps too heavily at times. Still, beneath that melodrama lies a sincere attempt to explore responsibility, sacrifice, and the cost of living a double life. The introduction of Dr. Octopus elevates the film to another level. Alfred Molina brings gravitas and menace to the role, portraying a brilliant scientist whose tragedy spirals into obsession. Visually, the character mirrors his early comic book incarnation with remarkable precision. The mechanical tentacles are not just special effects, they feel alive, dangerous, and integral to his presence. The battles between Spider-Man and this fallen genius are staged with thrilling intensity, easily justifying the film's ambitious budget. Not every supporting thread lands perfectly. Harry Osborn's resentment occasionally drifts into monotony, and some performances strain under the emotional weight. However, the always entertaining J. Jonah Jameson steals nearly every scene he appears in. J.K. Simmons injects razor-sharp comedic timing into the newsroom chaos, reminding audiences that superhero films can, and should, have fun with themselves. The returning cast remains a major strength. Tobey Maguire continues to portray Peter Parker with an awkward sincerity that makes his struggles relatable. Kirsten Dunst gives Mary Jane emotional depth beyond the archetype of a love interest. James Franco leans into Harry's bitterness, while Rosemary Harris brings warmth and quiet wisdom as Aunt May. Together, they form a cast that feels cohesive and in many ways definitive. What makes the film resonate decades later is how faithfully it channels the spirit of the comics created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. Their work under Marvel Comics redefined superheroes in the 1960s, giving them everyday problems and emotional vulnerability. Raimi's adaptation captures that revolutionary tone, ordinary struggles wrapped in extraordinary circumstances. It may not feel groundbreaking to modern viewers raised on interconnected cinematic universes, but at the time, it was a bold and heartfelt realization of comic book storytelling. Artistically and commercially, the film stands as a triumph, a reminder of when superhero cinema prioritized heart as much as spectacle. Revisiting it today feels less like nostalgia and more like appreciation for a trilogy that understood its characters. 3 films were all this cast received, but they remain some of the most memorable entries in the genre. Rosemary Harris delivers a heartfelt speech about standing firm in doing what's right, even when the world seems set against you. And Elia Baskin manages to carve out a lasting memory with a single, perfectly timed word. Rent. Moments like these make it nearly impossible to pick a favorite among the trilogy. Each installment has its own special charm. The first film wins me over with the magic of discovering the story for the first time. The second stands tall because of that unforgettable scene where Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man halts a runaway train with sheer willpower. And the third. It earns its place in my heart thanks to the oddly tender kitchen scene featuring James Franco and Kirsten Dunst making breakfast together. Maybe I'm just sentimental. Viewer caution. If you're prone to vertigo or motion sickness, this might be a rough ride. When Spider-Man swings through the city, the camera moves fast and furious, enough to leave sensitive viewers feeling queasy. In short, don't look down. Peter Parker's world is anything but simple. He's torn between his love for Mary Jane and the heavy burden of responsibility that comes with wearing the mask. His academic life is faltering, his best friend harbors a growing desire for revenge against Spider-Man, and a new, formidable enemy rises from the ashes of scientific ambition gone wrong. It's a storm brewing on every front. After the tremendous success of the 2002 film, director Sam Raimi returned with a sequel that not only met expectations, but, in many ways, surpassed them. Instead of reinventing the wheel, he refined what already worked, focusing on character development while raising the stakes. The returning cast strengthens the emotional continuity, turning the series into a character-driven saga rather than just another effects-heavy spectacle. The heart of the film lies in Peter's struggle with his dual identity. Raimi carefully guides us through his internal conflict, planting subtle hints of the chaos to come. When Dr. Octopus finally emerges, the narrative explodes with energy. Because we're already invested in these characters, the impact hits harder and feels earned. With a larger budget at his disposal, Raimi expands the film's visual scope. The special effects are more polished, the action sequences more dynamic, and the villain more grounded and emotionally complex than the first film's antagonist. There are also playful nods to Raimi's earlier works and affectionate references that longtime Spider-Man fans will appreciate. The standout addition is Alfred Molina as Dr. Otto Octavius, better known as Dr. Octopus. Molina injects intensity and vulnerability into the role. While the character's arc isn't explored to its fullest potential, Molina's performance carries real emotional weight, especially as the mechanical tentacles begin to dominate the man rather than serve him. Those moments are both eerie and unexpectedly moving. I'll admit I'm not usually drawn to superhero films. Still, as someone who grew up reading Spider-Man comics, the web-slinger would easily top my list if asked to name a favorite hero. Movies like this often rely on spectacle, explosions, grand set pieces, and flashy effects, but Raimi, whose underrated thriller A Simple Plan showcased his storytelling strengths, aims for something more balanced. Is Spider-Man 2 entertaining? Absolutely. It attempts to blend large-scale visual effects with intimate human drama. That balance doesn't always succeed. When the focus shifts heavily to Peter's personal struggles, the pacing can drag, occasionally evoking memories of powerless Clark Kent in Superman II, a hero reduced to vulnerability. At times, you may find yourself wishing for more screen time with Dr. Octopus instead, and that's where the film truly shines. Molina doesn't just play a comic book villain, he humanizes him. He elevates Doc Ock beyond caricature, portraying a tragic figure wrestling with forces beyond his control. Some purists might nitpick his appearance or costume choices, but those surface-level criticisms miss the point. Performance outweighs aesthetics. Even Danny Elfman's occasionally overpowering score can't overshadow Molina's magnetic presence. Ultimately, the best aspects of Spider-Man 2 have less to do with cutting-edge CGI or explosive action, and more to do with the quiet, human moments, the doubts, sacrifices, and moral choices that define a hero. It's in those pauses between the punches that the film truly finds its strength. Rather than relying solely on explosive spectacle, Spider-Man 2 finds director Sam Raimi giving his costumed heroes space to reflect, confide, and wrestle with their personal shortcomings. Beneath the spandex and swinging webs lies a surprisingly intimate drama. At its heart, the film explores the emotional turmoil of Peter Parker, a young man torn between his ordinary responsibilities and the heavy burden of heroism. Think of it as Shakespearean doubt wrapped in a red and blue suit. The film's quieter, character-driven moments stand in contrast to its more conventional superhero confrontations. This time, Spider-Man faces Dr. Otto Octavius, a brilliant scientist whose ambitious experiment goes catastrophically wrong, leaving him fused to 4 mechanical arms and spiraling into villainy. While the concept is intriguing, the action sequences surrounding this new threat occasionally lack the punch one might expect. In fact, viewers may find themselves reminiscing about the Green Goblin from the first Spider-Man film, whose presence felt more dynamic. Willem Dafoe briefly reappears as Norman Osborn, though his cameo is fleeting and far less menacing than before. Most of the principal cast returns for the sequel. Tobey Maguire once again embodies the conflicted web-slinger. Kirsten Dunst reprises her role as Mary Jane Watson. James Franco returns as Harry Osborn, and Rosemary Harris and J.K. Simmons provides steady support as Aunt May and the blustering newspaper editor J. Jonah Jameson. The continuity in casting helps maintain the emotional thread established in the original story. Picking up a couple of years after the first installment, the narrative finds Peter Parker struggling to balance his academic life, financial instability, and secret identity. Rarely has a superhero seemed so weighed down by everyday misfortune. Peter loses his pizza delivery job after prioritizing crime fighting over punctuality, even though he saves 2 children from a speeding truck along the way. His landlord relentlessly demands rent, and even simple tasks become complicated by his double life. Elia Baskin injects humor as Peter's impatient landlord, while Raimi and screenwriter Alvin Sargent lean heavily into Peter's awkward, almost exaggerated nerdiness. Romance further complicates Peter's life. He longs to confess his feelings to Mary Jane, yet each attempt is interrupted by criminal emergencies. This constant tug-of-war pushes Peter into a full-blown identity crisis. When his web shooting falters, he begins questioning whether he should continue as Spider-Man at all. In a moment of defeat, he abandons the suit and tries to live as an ordinary college student, even turning away from a crime happening right before him. Of course, destiny and Dr. Octavius eventually forces him back into action. The screenplay weaves together three major storylines: Peter's internal conflict over his dual identity, his complicated relationship with Mary Jane, and the looming threat posed by Dr. Octavius. With so many narrative threads, the film stretches to over 2 hours, feeling slightly overextended. Multiple climactic beats reflect the triple plot structure, and the final showdown with Dr. Octavius unfolds in a somewhat predictable manner. Alfred Molina delivers a committed performance, yet his portrayal of Dr. Octopus feels more tragic than terrifying, reducing some of the dramatic stakes. Interestingly, the film shines brightest during its understated moments. Conversations about responsibility, truth, and love carry more emotional weight than the large-scale battles. Sargent's dialogue feels grounded and sincere, lending authenticity to Peter's struggles. Raimi's original Spider-Man felt fresh because it humanized its hero, emphasizing vulnerability over invincibility. In this sequel, that approach remains, but with slightly diminished impact. Tobey Maguire continues to portray Peter Parker less as a traditional superhero and more as a young man overwhelmed by life's pressures. That humanity remains the film's strongest asset. Longtime fans of the character will likely appreciate the sequel's faithfulness to the spirit of the comics, even if some scenes lack the energy and novelty of its predecessor. Ultimately, Spider-Man 2 is less about defeating villains and more about confronting self-doubt. It may not surpass the originality of the first film, but its introspective tone and emotional sincerity give it a distinctive place within the superhero genre. If you haven't watched the first Spider-Man film, stepping into Spider-Man 2 might leave you confused at times. Nearly every major character from the original returns, and many unresolved threads continue without much recap. The story assumes you're already familiar with Peter Parker's journey. Director Sam Raimi once again blends humor and drama, though this time he leans heavily into Peter's awkward, self-doubting persona. While the sequel doesn't quite eclipse its predecessor, it still delivers enough entertainment to justify a viewing. One noticeable issue is the film's uncertain identity. It often feels torn between being a high-energy superhero spectacle and an emotional romance centered on Peter's complicated relationship with Mary Jane. The action, humor, and love story don't always mesh smoothly, and the pacing suffers as a result. At times, the dramatic elements overshadow the superhero thrills. The performances, however, are not to blame. Tobey Maguire brings a genuine vulnerability to Peter Parker, making the character's struggles feel authentic. He portrays Peter's humanity so convincingly that it's easy to imagine him excelling in even more demanding dramatic roles. Kirsten Dunst returns as Mary Jane, delivering a solid performance, though some of her quieter, lingering moments feel slightly overextended. James Franco continues Harry Osborn's simmering resentment, hinting at future conflict. Supporting roles add depth and warmth. Rosemary Harris gives Aunt May a touching sincerity, while J.K. Simmons steals scenes as the fast-talking, headline-hunting newspaper editor. Cliff Robertson reprises Uncle Ben with quiet dignity. The special effects are undeniably impressive, particularly when Dr. Otto Octavius, Doc Ock, unleashes his mechanical arms. The visual work during his action sequences stands out. Still, some viewers may find his villainous presence less compelling compared to the antagonist from the first installment. Personal preference plays a role here, and for some, that difference impacts the overall ranking between the two films. Danny Elfman's musical score enhances both the emotional beats and the larger-than-life moments. The most jaw-dropping sequence by far is Spider-Man's desperate attempt to stop a runaway train, a scene that perfectly captures the hero's determination and sacrifice. For audiences who felt the original movie suffered from thin character work or uneven effects, this sequel offers noticeable improvement in those areas. Tobey Maguire fully inhabits the role of Peter Parker, arguably making the unmasked moments more powerful than the masked heroics. Alfred Molina's take on Doc Ock is especially memorable, bringing intelligence and intensity to the role. When he's on screen, the film gains momentum and focus. That said, not everyone sees the sequel as a triumph. Some viewers find it overly predictable and weighed down by repetitive emotional conflict. The Parker-Mary Jane relationship continues its cycle of longing and frustration. Harry broods over his father's fate, and Peter wrestles with abandoning the suit, narrative beats that unfold in fairly expected ways. In this view, the film sometimes feels like a superhero story without enough superhero action. Alfred Molina's Doc Ock remains a highlight even for critics of the film. His scenes crackle with energy and menace, and one could argue the movie might have benefited from giving him more screen time. When he takes center stage, the film sharpens considerably. Unfortunately, he often plays second fiddle to Peter's internal struggles. Ultimately, Spider-Man 2 sparks divided reactions. For many, it represents a thoughtful and emotionally layered superhero sequel. For others, it slows its own momentum with excessive melodrama. Whichever side you fall on, it undeniably played a major role in shaping how comic book heroes would be portrayed on screen in the years to follow. Not that my opinion will sway the masses, but if you're on the fence, you might be better off catching this one at home, where you can fast forward through the slower stretches. That said, Spider-Man 2 2004 delivers an emotionally rich and action-packed continuation of Peter Parker's journey. Being Spider-Man is tearing Peter's world apart. His relationship with Mary Jane is in shambles. He can't keep a steady job because crime fighting keeps making him late. His college performance is slipping. Aunt May is still grieving Uncle Ben, and Harry Osborn harbors resentment towards Spider-Man for his father's death. Overwhelmed by guilt and exhaustion, Peter makes the painful decision to hang up the suit. But when a brilliant scientist, Otto Octavius, soon labeled Dr. Octopus by the media, emerges as a dangerous new force, Peter is faced with the question of whether he can truly walk away from responsibility. Director Sam Raimi appears far more confident this time around. While the first film laid solid groundwork, this sequel feels more assured in both tone and scale. Raimi blends spectacle with personality, crafting sequences that are not only thrilling but visually memorable. His flair for slightly offbeat, almost horror-inspired imagery shines, especially during the chilling hospital surgery scene, which feels like a nod to his work on The Evil Dead. The visual effects show noticeable improvement compared to the first installment. Though some CGI still carries a slightly artificial sheen, it's far less distracting than before. The action sequences are sharper and more dynamic, particularly the battles between Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus. The elevated train rescue stands out as the film's crowning achievement, an expertly staged blend of tension, heroism, and character development. The cast elevates the material across the board. Tobey Maguire fully embodies Peter Parker's vulnerability and quiet determination, capturing both the awkwardness and sincerity of the character. Meanwhile, Alfred Molina delivers what many consider the definitive live-action Spider-Man villain performance. His portrayal of Otto Octavius balances intellect, tragedy, and menace, making him a formidable adversary, not just physically, but emotionally. The screenplay smartly deepens Peter's internal conflict. His temporary loss of powers isn't just a plot device, it symbolizes his psychological burnout. For a brief moment, he experiences normalcy, free from the burden of responsibility. Yet it's a heartfelt conversation with Aunt May that reminds him why he became Spider-Man in the first place. Sometimes, people need heroes, even when those heroes don't feel up to the task. Danny Elfman's score complements the action well, though it doesn't quite reach the legendary heights of his work on Batman. Still, it adds emotional weight where it counts. The film also effectively sets up the growing tension between Peter and Harry, laying groundwork for the next chapter in the trilogy. Revisiting it makes the prospect of rewatching Spider-Man 3 more intriguing, even if that entry remains divisive. Ultimately, while the debate over whether this surpasses the original may continue, there's little doubt that Spider-Man 2 refines and matures the story. It offers a layered villain, a deeply human protagonist, and action sequences that remain benchmarks in the genre. More than just a comic book movie, it's a character-driven drama wrapped in blockbuster spectacle, and that's what makes it endure. This film comes together in a way that feels surprisingly unified for a superhero story. Every element, character arcs, action, emotion, and spectacle, blends into a layered and rewarding experience. It stands as one of the rare examples where the genre genuinely feels elevated. For me, it's easily a 9/10. What makes it work so well is how deeply it understands Peter Parker. His awkward charm, underlying geekiness, and constant moral tug-of-war remain front and center. He's not just a hero in a costume. He's a young man torn between personal happiness and doing what he knows is right. That internal conflict gives the film its emotional backbone. The returning cast steps up their game. Kirsten Dunst brings more depth to Mary Jane this time, pushing past the simple damsel mold and growing into a stronger, more iconic presence by the finale. James Franco adds subtle tension and complexity to Harry's arc. Rosemary Harris as Aunt May is given more meaningful material and absolutely shines. Her scenes are heartfelt and quietly powerful. J.K. Simmons once again injects energy and humor into every moment as Jay. Jonah Jameson and the supporting ensemble feels perfectly cast. Alfred Molina's portrayal of Dr. Octopus is a standout. He treats the role with sincerity and weight, grounding the character in tragedy rather than caricature. In many ways, his performance surpasses the more exaggerated villain-style scene previously. The mechanical arms are brought to life convincingly, both as a technical achievement and as extensions of Octavius' fractured mind. When this movie first hit theaters, it felt like a defining moment for modern superhero cinema, arguably the strongest entry in the genre in decades at the time. Walking out of the theater, I felt that rare sense of pure cinematic joy. It captured the thrill of being a kid again, and it was one of the few summer blockbusters I happily revisited more than once. Even now, it holds up remarkably well and remains a benchmark for comic book adaptations. That said, not everything lands perfectly. The visual presentation can feel overly bright at times, and some of the humor leans heavily into slapstick territory. The attempts at comedy occasionally undercut the more dramatic moments, especially for viewers who don't connect with that particular style. Still, the story unfolds in a satisfying way, and the pacing remains steady throughout. The action sequences are dynamic and memorable, especially the hospital rampage and the runaway train confrontation. These moments showcase the hero's abilities in inventive and thrilling ways. The film strikes a balance between large-scale spectacle and personal drama, though it sometimes wavers when pushing comedic beats too hard. The visual effects are impressive for their time, and the blend of practical techniques with CGI is commendable. While the hero occasionally doesn't look fully realistic, the filmmakers wisely avoid over-reliance on digital spectacle. There's a lesson here. Just because CGI can accomplish anything doesn't mean it should do everything. Restraint can make the difference between immersion and fatigue. The score complements the story beautifully, adding emotional weight and grandeur where needed. On home release, the bonus materials are extensive, including documentaries, featurettes, commentaries, and additional footage that expands the experience. It's a solid package for fans who want to dive deeper into the production. At its heart, the film works because it's not just about superpowers, it's about responsibility, sacrifice, and morality. There's a compelling parallel between Peter, embracing his duty despite personal cost, and Otto Octavius struggling with his own corrupted ideals. One fights to live up to his principles. The other loses himself trying to justify his ambition. While the sequel that followed stumbled and later reboots captured some strengths but missed this particular magic, this entry remains, in my opinion, the definitive version of the character on screen. It has humor, romance, heart, and high-stakes action, all wrapped in a colorful, energetic package that embodies what a superhero film should be. From start to finish, the film boasts an impressive ensemble cast, stacked with memorable appearances and clever cameos. That said, while I appreciate meaningful character development, the movie leans a little too heavily into the emotional turmoil between Peter and Mary Jane, stretching the middle act with relationship-driven melodrama that slightly slows the momentum. And I have to say, using "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head" in an action-heavy superhero movie feels wildly out of place. It's far too literal and self-aware, pulling me out of the experience. It gave me the same feeling I had watching Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. For much of the first half, Peter Parker's life is a relentless parade of misfortune. He loses his pizza delivery job, gets reprimanded by his professor for missed deadlines, struggles financially while being underpaid by a morally questionable newspaper editor who publicly discredits his masked identity, and watches his Aunt May face eviction. On top of that, he misses Mary Jane's stage performance because crime-fighting calls at the worst possible moment, and even something as small as grabbing a drink turns into an exercise in humiliation. To make matters worse, his Spider-Man abilities begin to malfunction. The film really piles it on Peter simply cannot catch a break. Being Spider-Man has cost him almost everything personally. Mary Jane is engaged to astronaut John Jameson, and Peter fears he may have lost her for good. The emotional strain pushes him to a breaking point, leading him to question whether he even wants the burden of being a hero anymore. But fate intervenes when Dr. Otto Octavius suffers a catastrophic laboratory accident that fuses him with 4 powerful mechanical arms, transforming him into the formidable Dr. Octopus. Realizing that no one but Spider-Man can stop this new threat, Peter is forced to confront his identity crisis. Complicating matters further, Mary Jane becomes entangled in the chaos, and Harry Osborn, still consumed by anger over his father Norman Osborn's death, is determined to destroy the web-slinger he blames. If Spider-Man hopes to prevail, he must push himself beyond every physical and emotional limit. Easily the strongest entry in the franchise, Spider-Man 2 raises the bar for superhero films by grounding its spectacle in genuine emotional stakes. What makes it resonate so strongly is Sam Raimi's confident control over multiple character arcs. He balances their struggles without letting the story collapse under its own weight. There's so much layered storytelling that the film almost demands repeat viewings, once for the thrilling action sequences and again as a character-driven drama. Raimi's stylistic touches shine throughout, from dynamic point-of-view camera work during Doc Ock's hospital rampage to the director's signature sense of humor. Tobey Maguire delivers a more assured performance this time around, shedding some of the awkward stiffness from the first film and bringing greater emotional nuance to Peter's internal conflict. James Franco, however, truly stands out. His portrayal of Harry's growing bitterness simmers beneath the surface, hinting at a darker path ahead. Alfred Molina brings surprising depth to Dr. Octavius, making him both tragic and terrifying, while Kirsten Dunst and Rosemary Harris add warmth and humanity to Peter's world. J.K. Simmons once again steals scenes as the bombastic J. Jonah Jameson. Sam Raimi accomplishes something rare here, crafting a sequel that surpasses its predecessor while deepening its emotional core. By exploring Peter Parker's identity crisis, the tension between great power and great responsibility, the film delivers both blockbuster thrills and heartfelt storytelling. It stands as one of the finest superhero sequels ever made and remains a benchmark for the genre. Few superhero sequels manage to outshine their predecessors, but Spider-Man 2 does exactly that. Expanding on the foundation laid by its 2002 predecessor, this follow-up doesn't just raise the stakes, it deepens the heart. The visual effects still impress years later. The web-slinging is smoother, the cityscapes more vivid, and the action sequences reach exhilarating new heights. Two standout moments remain unforgettable: the chaotic bank confrontation and the extended subway showdown high above New York streets. That train battle alone ranks among the finest action scenes ever staged in a comic book adaptation, a masterclass in tension, choreography, and emotional payoff. But spectacle is only half the story. What truly distinguishes this film is its emotional weight. Peter Parker isn't simply battling a villain, he's struggling with adulthood. Bills pile up, friendships fray, responsibilities clash, and his double life pulls him in impossible directions. The world seems determined to keep him down. In many ways, this is one of the most relatable portrayals of early adult anxiety ever wrapped in a superhero costume. There's a slightly absurd, almost Kafka-like quality to Peter's misfortune. The universe keeps nudging him toward failure, missed classes, lost jobs, broken promises. Yet instead of becoming bleak, the film finds humor in his downward spiral. You want him to climb out of the metaphorical drain, but there's something darkly funny about how dramatically he tumbles into it. That blend of comedy and compassion makes him more endearing than ever. Director Sam Raimi brings a confident visual style that feels both playful and sincere. The tone remains lighter and more whimsical than darker superhero sequels like The Dark Knight, yet it never sacrifices depth. The humor is sharper, occasionally sillier than the first film, but always balanced by genuine emotion. It's heartfelt without being heavy, dramatic without losing its sense of fun. Alfred Molina's Dr. Otto Octavius is more than a standard antagonist. A brilliant scientist whose ambition leads to catastrophe, he becomes a tragic figure, fused with mechanical arms after a disastrous experiment. His descent into villainy feels personal and grounded rather than cartoonish. The screenplay gives him space to breathe, making the conflict feel intimate as well as explosive. Technically speaking, the pacing is relentless. Even nearly 2 decades later, most of the effects hold up remarkably well. The cast is perfectly assembled, the creativity evident in nearly every scene, and the personality of New York City shines through. The citizens feel alive, reactive part of the story rather than background noise. This isn't just a summer blockbuster. It's a character study disguised as one. It explores responsibility, identity, sacrifice, and the exhaustion of trying to be everything for everyone. Few superhero films capture that emotional balancing act so gracefully. In the end, it feels like the complete package: thrilling action, sincere performances, sharp humor, and real emotional resonance. If the original was impressive, this sequel refines and strengthens every element. For many viewers, it remains one of the finest superhero films ever made, perhaps even the gold standard for how to elevate a sequel. The sequel raises the bar by giving us a far more compelling villain. Dr. Octopus feels like a major step up from the Green Goblin. His battles with Spider-Man are more intense, more visually inventive, and much closer in spirit to the comic book version of the character. The mechanical arms aren't just for show, they're integrated into the choreography in ways that make every confrontation feel dynamic and memorable. Still, the heart of this film isn't just the action, it's Peter Parker. This chapter leans heavily into his personal struggles. Peter is overwhelmed by the responsibility that comes with his powers, while also wrestling with his feelings for Mary Jane Watson, a woman he believes he can't truly be with. That emotional tension is what makes the story resonate. I can't relate to the superhero aspect, obviously, but I absolutely understand holding back from someone you care about because you think they'd be better off without you. Add in bad luck and a tendency to trip over your own feet, and Peter suddenly feels very real. If I had his powers, I'm not sure I'd handle the pressure any better. By this point, it's been nearly 2 years since Peter Parker, Tobey Maguire, first donned the mask. Yet instead of things improving, his life is unraveling. He can't keep a steady job, his academic performance is slipping, and his friendship with Mary Jane is strained to the breaking point. The weight of living a double life becomes too much, and Peter makes the drastic decision to hang up the suit. Enter Dr. Otto Octavius. After a disastrous experiment, bonds his advanced mechanical arms permanently to his body, while also destroying the inhibitor chip that kept their artificial intelligence under control. Octavius transforms into a dangerous new threat. The Daily Bugle dubs him Dr. Octopus, and his descent into villainy leaves only one person capable of stopping him. The real question is whether Peter still has the courage to answer the call. My reaction to the film was somewhat mixed, but in a good way. Alfred Molina is outstanding as both the ambitious scientist and the tragic antagonist he becomes. His performance avoids the exaggerated campiness seen in the previous film's villain, opting instead for something more grounded and emotionally layered. The action sequences are thrilling, and in many cases, even more impressive than those in the original. And Bruce Campbell's brief appearance as the smug theater usher is a hilarious highlight. That said, I still struggle with Kirsten Dunst's portrayal of Mary Jane. In this installment, she feels more frustrating than sympathetic, and at times the character's choices test the audience's patience. I also found it hard to believe how many times Spider-Man's identity is exposed without major consequences. Despite those issues, the positives easily outweigh my complaints. The film delivers stronger emotional stakes, bigger action, and a more memorable villain than its predecessor. In fact, I'd rank it well above several other superhero sequels of its era. Final grade. B+ 2-disc collectors, edition, DVD features disc 1. Audio commentary featuring director Sam Raimi, producer Avi Arad, co-producer Grant Curtis, and Tobey Maguire special effects commentary with John Dykstra, and the visual effects crew trivia subtitle track 4 webisodes Ordinary, music video by Train blooper reel theatrical trailer, additional previews for various Sony releases disc 2. A 12-part behind-the-scenes documentary chronicling the making of the film 3, featurettes exploring the hero's internal crisis, the design of Doc Ock, and the film's female character's multi-angle breakdown of the dramatic pier sequence, concept art gallery preview for the Spider-Man 2 video game hidden extras, Easter eggs. A concealed spider icon in the commentary menu, leading to a special introduction from Sam Raimi, a hidden clip in the documentary section, featuring a surprise appearance in Doc Ock's costume, a playful musical surprise tucked inside the gallery menu, since bursting onto the scene in 1981 with The Evil Dead. Sam Raimi has built a reputation for blending energy, humor, and heart into his films, and this sequel is no exception. There's a common argument that action-heavy movies can't also be emotionally intelligent, but this film puts that notion to rest. It successfully combines spectacle, character development, humor, and genuine drama into a cohesive and satisfying superhero story. In short, it's not just a great comic book movie, it's a great movie, period. And as far as web-slinging heroes go, this is Spider-Man at his finest. Few superhero films attempt to juggle as many tones and genres as Spider-Man 2, and even fewer succeed. This sequel weaves together romance, science fiction, high-stakes action, light comedy, grounded drama, fantasy, and even a faint brush of horror. In many films, such variety can feel cluttered or forced, but here, every ingredient serves a purpose. Nothing feels decorative or inserted just for flair. Remove one thread, and the entire narrative tapestry would weaken. It's both tightly constructed and impressively ambitious. Right from the opening moments, the movie signals its energy with a kinetic pizza delivery chase through New York City. Somehow, even something as mundane as delivering a pie becomes pulse-pounding in Spider-Man's world. From there, the film rarely slows down. When it isn't dazzling viewers with gravity-defying set pieces, it's grounding the spectacle in heartfelt, character-driven scenes. What sets this installment apart from many action-heavy blockbusters is its emotional consistency. Some films treat quieter scenes as breathers between explosions. This one makes them just as compelling. The conversations between Peter Parker and Aunt May, for example, resonate with sincerity and warmth. Because the characters are written with depth and vulnerability, these exchanges carry genuine weight. The cast of characters feels layered and human, even when superpowers are involved. Each figure carries insecurities, ambitions, and internal conflicts that translate convincingly on screen. That emotional authenticity is what allows the more fantastical elements to soar without feeling hollow. The ensemble elevates the film significantly. Tobey Maguire embodies Peter Parker with a vulnerability that makes the character believable. A more conventionally macho portrayal might have undermined the role's relatability, but Maguire captures Peter's awkward charm and moral struggle convincingly. Kirsten Dunst has a subtler presence this time around, yet she makes the most of her screen time, portraying Mary Jane with emotional clarity. Alfred Molina delivers a commanding performance as Dr. Octopus. He convincingly balances brilliance and menace, portraying a scientist whose tragic transformation into a villain feels both tragic and terrifying. J.K. Simmons nearly steals every scene as the fiery newspaper editor J. Jonah Jameson. His comedic timing injects the film with sharp humor, giving it a lively third dimension. One particularly chilling moment comes when Doc Ock coldly warns a victim, "I'll peel the skin off your face," a line that hints at the darker undertones woven into the film's fabric. Director Sam Raimi, known for launching his career with the cult horror classic The Evil Dead, brings a distinctive style to this blockbuster sequel.